Hey, folks. Nice to meet you guys. Hey, thanks for showing up, especially late on the first day. I know you guys are probably tired from all the excitement, so we'll start to get through this. So today's talk, this afternoon's talk is about using Pivotal Cloud Foundry across Azure and Azure Stack for hybrid applications and kind of what that looks like from a deployment standpoint and a user interface and user experience standpoint. So the first part that we're going to talk about is Pivotal Cloud Foundry. It'll be a high-level overview of what it is for those of you that don't use it, and a refresher for those of you that do. And then we'll talk a little bit about what it looks like on Azure, and then how it looks and feels on Azure Stack. We'll move into a little bit about hybrid use cases. So using applications both in the public cloud as well as your private cloud. And then we'll move on to hybrid solutions, right? So what does PCF look like on both Azure as well as Azure Stack? So a little bit about Cloud Foundry. It is a platform as a service. So a platform as a service is a little bit different than infrastructure as a service, and it sits at a higher level of abstraction. So it's closer to delivering business value than necessarily technical value. So one of the great parts about Pivotal Cloud Foundry is that it's enabled really, really well with Azure, right? We have full support for all of the sovereign clouds, right? So that's Azure Public, Azure China, Azure Germany, GovCloud, and then Azure Stack. Right? So Pivotal Cloud Foundry can actually be found on the Azure Marketplace, right? So if you're really curious, you want to go try it, log in, give it a try. It's not a big footprint. You guys will have a great time. One of the great points about Cloud Foundry as a whole is that it's primarily open source. The majority of Cloud Foundry is open source, and you can find it through the Cloud Foundry Foundation, which Microsoft is a member of. Right? So I think ultimately the one point, if you were to get away from this, about Cloud Foundry is that it's a really, really easy way to get raw code into the cloud. We can take your raw code, and then we can make something of it in production in 30 seconds or less. So why would you run Cloud Foundry on Azure, especially if Azure already has its pre-existing services? Well, the great part is, other than the fact that you can push raw code to the cloud and we can make something of it, we partnered with Microsoft to write service brokers. And these service brokers are great ways to consume Azure first-party Azure services, right? So instead of going out and deploying Azure Redis and trying to manage that instance and its lifecycle, as well as credentials or Cosmos DB or things like that, through our service broker, what you can do is you can tell Cloud Foundry, hey, I need an Azure Redis instance, or hey, I need an Azure Cosmos DB instance, and it'll go provision one for you, manage its lifecycle, as well as the credentials for it. All you do is consume it. The great part is Cloud Foundry has two ways of running applications. The first is through the application runtime, which is pushing raw code to the cloud, and the other is the container runtime, which is our implementation of Kubernetes. And the service broker works for both. It's a really great experience. Microsoft has done tons of engineering work to make it an awesome user experience. So kudos to them. And the great part is it's extendable. So if you go and you are a Cloud Foundry user and you want to consume Azure first-party services that aren't available in the service broker, it's super extendable, and you can go through and use user-provided services and be successful in that way. So one of the great things about Cloud Foundry is that it has first-party support and native support for Spring Cloud, right? So if you want to run Java on Azure as well as Spring on Azure, this is the right place to do it, right? We also have first-class support for the .NET framework, going back several revisions, and we do support awesome frameworks such as WWF or WCF, and then .NET Core. So we do have a library to use Spring with .NET, and we call it Steel Toe. We donated Steel Toe to the .NET Foundation late last year, and we've found great traction and great responses with customers through Steel Toe. So if you want to use Spring and .NET at the same time, Steel Toe is the way to go. One of the best parts about Cloud Foundry is that it's a polyglot paths. So whether you're writing in Node or Go, .NET, Java, Fortran, right? We have a customer that's running Fortran. We can execute on that and help you be successful in ways that you want to be successful. Cloud Foundry all but requires cloud-native applications, right? So if you don't know what you want your application to look like in the cloud, but you want to modernize, Cloud Foundry is the right place to do it, right? So one of the best things about Cloud Foundry, and this aligns really, really well with Azure Stack, is that you write your code once and you can push it everywhere, right? So if you push code from deployment A to deployment B, no difference, right? It's awesome. So the focus with Pivotal Cloud Foundry on Azure Stack is all about consistency and sameness. So it's all the same libraries, right? So it's the same CLI, it's the same SDKs for both Spring and .NET, and it's all of the same templates, right? So if you are defining your application manifests for Cloud Foundry on Azure, defining it for Cloud Foundry on Azure Stack, it's identical. There's no difference. When you go to log into the Pivotal Cloud Foundry UI, admin UI, as well as application UI on Azure Stack, it's identical, right? All the portals are the same. All of the APIs are the same. Nothing is different. And that's the best part about this, right? So if you're trying to manage hybrid applications both on private hardware as well as in the public cloud, what you can really do, what's awesome is that it's the same experience and the same consistent experience. So one of the great parts about the work that we do with Microsoft is that we're very, very focused on look and feel, right? If you go to use Cloud Foundry on Azure Public, it should feel identical to PCF on Azure. You, as a developer, should not know that you're deploying your application to Azure Stack versus public Azure, right? And if that doesn't happen, come talk to us, right? We want to make sure that your vision is identical. Sorry, your experience is identical. All right, so let's talk a little bit about hybrid use cases and kind of some of what those are. So let's say that you are deploying your financial application to a country that has high regulations about where data has to reside and how data can be managed within your country. Let's say that Indonesia or Germany or something like that. Right? The great part about Azure Stack is that it allows you to come in and drop your applications on Azure Stack, getting that great Azure experience, but you get to meet all these regulatory compliance and data sovereignty rules, especially right off the bat. Let's say that you have a ton of data that is on site, and you want to make sure that you're serving this on-site data in a fast and reliable way. Right? Azure Stack is the right way to do that. You can come in and take the same Azure models that you have in the public cloud and do it in the private cloud. The last major use case for hybrid applications is in both edge as well as disconnected solutions. So let's say that you want to take your awesome Azure experience and you want to go through and deploy it where Azure doesn't currently have a market, right? There's no region for Azure in Antarctica, right? Let's say you have a workload in Antarctica that you need to do. Well, the great part about Azure Stack is you can bring Azure Stack, drop it in Antarctica, and now you are able to be successful with your applications in Antarctica, right? So when we look at the kind of grand scheme of hybrid application deployment models, the best that you'll ever be able to do is close enough, right? When we look at, let's say, region A on the left, in the public cloud, you have your standard application pool that talks to, a backend database. And it's awesome because it works. You can take this, and now you want to scale from region A to region B. And when you go to scale, some of the problems that you're going to run into are consistency, right? So operators will always try to take a running application and make it identical in a new region. But the challenge is configurations are different. There's different service offerings. Maybe the library that a library of a product that you're using doesn't support that region because it's new and it's online, right? There are all these challenges that come with it. So another one is software versioning. Let's say that you have a new version of your application that you want to publish to your primary region. Well, now that you've publish your primary region, let's publish it to your secondary region. How do you do that in a consistent way that is easy to manage and you don't have any problems with in the long run? Well, really, there's not a whole lot of easy ways. But one of the great parts is with Cloud Foundry, you can really make that a great experience. So because the focus that Pivotal and Microsoft have together with Cloud Foundry is sameness and consistency, we've made sure that the experience that you have for hybrid applications is the same, right? So if you're deploying to the Azure public cloud, with Spring and Cloud Foundry, we want to make sure that the experience that you have in your Azure Stack private cloud is identical, right? Nothing's different. Everything is the same. So it goes back to that original mantra of, write your code once and push it anywhere. And some of the great parts is Azure Stack has compatibility with ExpressRoute. And so when it comes time for a fully managed solution, what you can look at doing is using Azure Public Cloud with Cloud Foundry running on top of it, and then Cloud Foundry with Azure Stack, and using ExpressRoute to tie them all together. And the great part is you get one congruent network all the way across. All your firewall policies can be simplified. You don't have to make weird exceptions for applications because your deployment model is identical, right? The great part about Cloud Foundry is to make it easy to deploy applications because we handle all of the behind-the-scenes magic for you. Well, if you can take that and have that also in your private cloud, why wouldn't you want to do that, right? You can, if let's say that you're starting with your on-premise cloud because you have on-premise workloads, well, dropping Cloud Foundry in there gives you a great developer experience off of the bat, and then taking that to the Azure public cloud is really, really simple. It's all the same operator experiences. It's all the same developer experiences. And when you tie it together with ExpressRoute, it makes management super simple. DNS, firewalls, network pathing. It's all the same, and it's wonderful. We've had a great time with it, and we would love for you guys to get out there and try it and provide feedback for us. So when you look at kind of this as a whole, your takeaway from this is, well, first, it's easy for both a developer and an operator. It's easy for a developer because, it's the same Cloud Foundry experience, and it's the same management experience through Bosch. It's fast, right? Pushing code is the same. If you're pushing code in Azure Public Cloud with Cloud Foundry and, you're deploying like this, you're going to get that same exact experience on-premise. From an operator standpoint, if you're pushing, new services through Bosch to your developers, you're going to have that same exact experience for both a speed and consistency standpoint on-premise, right? Pivotal and Microsoft both recommend it as your developer experience for Azure Stack. The reason is, it's maintainable, it's very maintainable, and it's really consistent, right? If you notice nuances between, Pivotal Cloud Foundry on Azure Public Cloud and Pivotal Cloud Foundry on Azure Stack, we would be really surprised, and we'd love to talk to you about that, right? Because our focus on this has been making sure that everything is the same, it's identical, it feels good, and that your happy, easy developer experience kind of continues on premise. So that's all I got. We would love to hear your feedback. Have a great rest of the build.